Shelly, how does prayer work? I understand what you're saying about prayer working in regarding one's own karma. How does prayer work for others at a distance?
There was a scientist in Russia who figured out how psychic effects work at a distance. You know, light is inversely proportional to the square of the distance, so is gravity. And the strong force field, which is a force field that takes place within the atom itself, is inversely proportional to the 7th part of the distance, which means you go just a tiny little bit distance away from the center of the atom, and there's no force field at all for any practical purposes. Then there is gravity, which is extremely weak in comparison to it. But it too is inversely proportional to the square of the distance. Now, the psychic force field is inversely proportional to the first part of the distance. This was discovered by a man who I call Korsagin, and that is not the way you pronounce his name, but he was a Russian, and I have no concept of how to pronounce his name. And he found out by measuring with what he called an, what kind of a pendulum was that, Deborah? Asymmetrical, yeah, an asymmetrical pendulum. And this asymmetrical pendulum, he found out that he could measure the force fields of the psychic phenomena. In fact, he could tell when a psychic came into his presence with this instrument how good they were and whether they were a sender or a receiver. But it would not work in the summertime when plants were growing. It only worked when it was in the wintertime and there was no plants growing. And this is how I discovered. Now, this scientist was comparable, and is comparable to Einstein, and he used Einstein mathematics to come to this conclusion. So your force field of anything you're aware of, which you are radiating, is inversely proportional to the first part of the distance. And regardless, what, for instance, you're praying. Your praying sets up force fields all around you according to the nature and awareness of your prayer. Remember, for instance, back a couple hundred years ago, they found out that when smallpox would be around, that children in different nations and entirely different environments were coming down with smallpox. They would dream of the same being with pox on his face. In other words, smallpox had a form. That seemed that and some of the superstitions thought that this was a being that actually came around, and anyone that he touched, he got smallpox. Because all force fields, remember, personified. And so whatever you set up, whatever force you set up becomes a being, becomes personified in some way. Like in the Egyptians, there's the alligator god, there's a sphinx. In other words, all force fields are personified to a certain manner. You go to India and you have many different types of aspects and natures of the God force, where you can, by the forces which you set up, things of a similar nature are in rapport with one another. You draw unto yourself what you're aware of, and so by your prayer you are setting up a force field. You're actually working magic to move yourself into a sphere of environment so that the outer environment represents your inner environment. And according to the nature and the manner of your prayer, your outer environment will affect your inner environment. So if you want to change your outer environment, change your inner environment through prayer or any other means of magic. But remember, magic goes an awful long ways, and what you might think you want, after you get it, you might not want it.
I'm curious, a lot of prophets and the Indians and various people have prophesied difficulties, times of difficulties in the century. And while some groups, like some Christian groups, for example, think it's the end of the world, and others, such as the Hopis, say that there'll be a lot of problems and then things are going to get better. And I was curious if you had any opinion about any of that.
That's what's going to happen?
Yeah.
Well, I have talked to Yogananda, and I've talked to a man whom I call Corporal Singh. I give the corporal name to it because I can't pronounce the Hindu name properly. Doesn't mean that he's a corporal in the army. And he was here in Sarasota. No, I'm not in Sarasota, this is Chicago. But he was in Sarasota in Florida, and I talked to him for about 2 hours. And remember, this was about 20 years ago, and many, many more years ago before World War II took place. I talked to Yogananda. And Yogananda, during World War II, thought that there was going to come a time when there was a great famine in the world. And he had all his disciples working in the garden. He says, if you don't have a garden and have it, you will starve to death. And so with my humor, says, if you have a garden, you won't starve to death, you'll die lead poisoning. And so then Corporal Singh came around, and he talked to me, and he says that there's a great famine coming. He says, in this nation, he says, maybe you don't understand because I don't speak English too good. He says, people will eat people here in the United States. He says, I don't mean in India to eat people there, but he says a great tragedy is coming. So he too saw the same thing, but to find out when the time of it's coming, remember even the disciples said that Christ would come again. And some said it will be thousands, but not thousands before Christ come again in the Christian concept of religion. So now we have, what is it, until the year 2000, and we must subtract 4 from that. It's not too long that Christ has to come again. See, all different religions are looking for the Messiah. The Arabians are looking for the Mahdi. He will come around, you know, and solve all of their problems too. The world has finally got mankind into a position he can't solve it for himself. And so he's looking for some external help to solve his problems for him, and hope that some of the terrible things that are going to take place won't take place. If you look at the records which existed before we entered into the Aryan Age, which took place around 12,500 years ago, as far as, now this is a vague period of time, the Aryan Age was to go forth conquering and to conquer. It would live by the sword and it would perish with the sword. So there is, according to what is written in the Akashic records, there will be World War III. If enough people got together, maybe it could be avoided. But what is still written there, and is very strong, there will be World War III. And if there is World War III, plants will not grow true. Yogananda says seeds will not bear true and will become worth their weight in gold. Mankind will live beneath the surface of the earth. And the prophecies was not too favorable. But there are places, for instance, let's say war broke out tonight. 98% of the people in Sweden would go underground and could stay there for 100 years without ever coming to the surface and survive. They have hydroponic gardens and everything else. Their factories are mainly underground anyhow. It's cheaper to heat them under there than it is on the surface. And they have all kind of tunnels going from place to place, so most people are within a very close distance to going underground. And in a very short moment of time, some homes are really connected to the underground pattern. And Switzerland is another place where many people will survive. There are some places here in the United States where they have gathered together some of the best students from your colleges, and with their children are living in some of the caverns like in Texas. And they have a complete civilization. There's one thing interferes with this, and that's the beautiful neutron bomb. It can send neutron beams down to about 2 miles beneath the surface of the earth and wipe out these culture centers. But why would you wipe out something, you know, that wasn't offering you disturbances, like certain places in Sweden? But the future is not favorable for mankind, and so the indications are a great famine is going to take place, and mankind had better prepare for such an event. But when, this Corporal Singh told me within 10 years, and as I said, that's 20 years ago, and still has not happened. So it might not happen in any of our lifetime. I can't tell you when. And hope that people will do something to avoid it. Anyone else that? Mm-hmm.
You touched a little on symbolism. Could you expand a bit on that?
On symbolism? Well, the best source of symbolism is to study astrology, which divides, see, when you have 4 factors and 2 of them are the same, in other words, you are aware that you are, you're the beholder, you're the beheld, those are 2 symbols which are the same. Then there's the act of the beholding, and then there's the result of it, the memory banks of all of this. So it's the 4 symbols. When you have 4 symbols, 2 of which are the same, they can be arranged in only 12 different ways. Like, for instance, in the Egyptian or in the Hebrew, it was IHVH, IHHV, IVHH, VIHHI. In other words, like this. And only 12 different ways. Each one of these became a compartment in which you store symbols, and which you store information. And so you have 12 compartments which are put around in the form of a circle, because a circle is immortality. There's no beginning and no end, see, to it. And so we take, for instance, like the second house. The first house is your own personality complex that identifies, personifies a person, place, or thing. The second house is the easiest to understand and indicates inanimate wealth. Jewels, gold, money, your soul, because this is the memory banks and it's the only thing you have of any value. You can sell your soul to some being and he can avoid incarnating with all the uncomfortableness of that and still get vicarious satisfaction by going through your memory banks. And if you know how to measure these particular factors, you can find out whether you're going up and down in these particular things. Everything that you become aware of, you put in these cubby holes, so to speak. And it works like this. In other words, you know that when you think in a mathematical form, you can say 2 is 1 greater than 1 and 1 less than 3. 3 is 1 greater than 2 and 1 less than 4. In other words, there's a sequential relationship of symbols. And it's exact. Well, in the symbols of your spirit, there's also a sequential relationship of symbols. And they follow one another as night to day, as 1, 2, 3 follow one another. And I'll go just for a couple of them to show how it follows. The first symbol is self-conscious awareness, which is your spirit. Now, in your spirit, any change, any slightest amount of variation, regardless how minute an event has transpired, the event now is part of your memory banks. It's your soul. Now your spirit can examine the soul and can examine the spirit. And it has 2 things to go between. The memory track of the spirit, like the reflection of the spirit and the spirit itself. Oscillating between these 2 points, it becomes the 3rd house, Gemini, the 3rd house oscillation. And now with this oscillation, it's able to find out the difference between the true and the reflection, Cancer and Leo, 4th and the 5th. And then we can discriminate against this and then balance it. Now just on and around, and then we find after we've gone through 12 different variations of states of self-conscious awareness, it repeats like a record in a spiral form.
Thank you.
Let's see. You had yours up first, so.
Shelly, what is your purpose when you hypnotize someone?
Pardon, I didn't get that.
What is your purpose when you hypnotize someone?
When I did?
When you did or when you do?
Oh, to experiment. See, when I was young, I hypnotized everybody and experimented on everybody that came within my reach. My mother, my father, my brothers, my sisters, my cousins, my aunts, it didn't matter.
So what is your definition of your hypnotizing someone?
I don't know. I let the other person do it. My curiosity was my main reason for doing it. I want to find out what happened, how the mind worked, how the spirit functioned, how to control time. That has been my greatest experiment of this time, how to control time. I've done a lot of experiments on the controlling of time, and I wasn't able to control it too well. And now, some would say that I shouldn't do these things. Yogananda didn't think I should do it, but then Manly P. Hall, who's a great spiritual leader, he did a lot of hypnosis and experimented in his way. And so I am rather careful in my experiments. I even found a method and experimented with my wife. And I was going to find an electronic means of giving everybody God consciousness. Easy, see? And so I had created an electronic machine, and there was quite a bit of electricity jumping back and forth, see? And I had 12, like the 12 different states that just spoke to the other woman, see? And so I had pads which was put around her body. And now she had to sit there nude, and the pads were soaked in salt water. Now, in order to get the energy flowing in a particular sequence, quite a bit of energy was used. 550 watts is what I was using, but it was high frequency voltage, so it didn't hurt. That's right. It wasn't really dangerous, but she didn't know that, and she had written a note saying to exonerate me, you know, in case she died under this particular condition.
She covered you, son.
Yeah, but there was one thing I never found out whether the machine worked or not, you see, because I would no sooner run it around, you know, by hand, then one of the pads would dry out. See, with all this heat of 550 watts, and then the lightning would come in here, and she'd jump, see. Well, this was not the way to samadhi, by jumping. So I've done a lot of things maybe I shouldn't have done, see. Any other questions?
You talked about the importance of forgiving other people. Could you say something about the importance of forgiving yourself, self-forgiveness?
Oh yes, everybody has a tremendous guilt trip, especially women. Women have a terrible guilt trip. This is why they put up with us men. And now, this is your own unbalanced forces. You feel guilty. Wherever you have a square or as they say, an inconjunct aspect, which is a 150-degree aspect. This is a relationship between 150 degrees on the wheel, which is around you where you keep your symbols. It's called a guilt aspect. And people feel guilty because they have this particular angle of unbalanced forces. Remember, each angle has its own particular interpretation, which is kind of involved for me to go into here, because it would assume that you all had a lot of information, which most of you don't. There's some that do. And so this is a relationship where you have a lot of guilt, a lot of unbalanced forces, and you want to get around, get away from these unbalanced forces. These unbalanced forces is what causes all your trouble with other people. And so if you forgive yourself, which means you balance out these forces really, and you do it by meditation. And doing it by meditation, you have freed yourself of all these things. Then somebody come along and say, behold, here's a saint. And you find people will react to you differently. Remember, you can say almost anything you want and get away with it depending on how you say it. Remember in the old West days, smile when you say that, partner, and his hand is going to his gun, you see?
How do you know if you're a sender or a receiver, and can you be both?
You can be both, but some people are an extremely good sender and some people are very good receivers. And though some people can be both a sender and a receiver, it depends upon what I would call the best way of expressing it is expressing it by symbols. Symbols by dividing the wheel into 30 degrees and marking what we call different angle relationships. And you find that certain angle relationships indicates a person's a good sender, certain other angle relationships indicates a person is a good receiver. Some are variable.
How can a person, a regular person, know if they're a sender or a receiver? If they get images, does that mean they're a receiver?
Yes, could be. And some can send out a strong, in other words, healers are good senders automatically, and some people have a very good healing ability. Some people, for instance, you can take tarot cards or an ordinary deck of playing cards, or you can throw sticks. It doesn't matter what you do. Those are modalities. That's all you're doing. And you get ideas and things that you can help somebody else. And if you have a strong desire to help somebody else in this way, and try it. And if you really can see the future to help the individual, you're a good receiver. And if you can heal by placing your hand on an individual, you're a good sender. Now you can also send it, you don't have to be close to an individual if you're a psychic sender. Or you can go over to Russia and get this Koshigin to measure you. He claims he can measure the distortion in time by stretching a rubber band through 2 feet of concrete. I don't know.
When the individual transcends the object of meditation and experiences the being, what is that being?
Wait, repeat that again.
When the individual transcends the object of meditation in the 3...
Oh, so it becomes one?
Yes.
And what is it?
Yeah.
What is that being?
What is that one?
Oh, that one is interpreted as bliss. It is interpreted as unselfish love, and is interpreted, well, let me give two expressions that Yogananda gave for it. Maybe this would be better. He says, imagine that they kept you awake for 7 days and 7 nights and wouldn't let you sleep at all. Then all of a sudden they laid you down on a nice feather-tick bed. His idea of feather-tick bed was very comfortable, see. He says, and say, now you can go to sleep. He says, that moment before you went to sleep, that's God consciousness. That is what is meant by that. The other one is this. Half of all the cells in your body are male, half of all the cells in your body are female. These cells are all in an act of sex at the same time. They all reach a climax at the same time. This is the bliss of God consciousness. This is the one. Go ahead.
What is that transcending? Is that transcending into the being of the cosmic dreamer, or is it the beingness that even holds the cosmic dreamer of this cosmos?
According to Yogananda and the theology, if you are a self-existing one, you have no beginning, you have no end. Therefore, you are a coexistent one, and it exists within you. It is not like well, Yogananda says the word nirvana was because it was translated into the English language and because of the English orientation of the Christian concept, it lost its real meaning. He refused to use the word nirvana, which meant that you were like a drop, your spirit was a drop which entered back into the ocean, and it was as difficult to get you out as it was to get the atoms that made that drop when it got into the ocean. That would not be the spirit of a self-existing one. That might include some other beings that are in existence, but not a self-existing one. And when you reach that oneness, it would be balanced self-conscious awareness, which is bliss, which is a deep peace that goeth before all understanding, and is also called wisdom. And it's a very beautiful place to find. But then you could find somebody else who would know how to knock you off that pinpoint of balance and press the right button on you, and then you'd have to start again, because you might not have balanced out other states of awareness. In transfinite existence, the combination is transfinite to the Aleph Par. You remember, it's infinite to the infinite Par. There's infinity upon infinities. So there is never no end to anything. Of course, you can go into someone else's dream and dream their dreams, and that's what you're doing here. And if you reach a union with a cosmic dreamer, you have found and solved, it's like you went to a school, to a class, and you have reached union with your mentor so that he taught you everything that he knew. That is the connection here in your cosmic dreamer. But so that you and he are one and the same being, no, there's one thing in which you excel all other beings. You are aware that you are. If God was more aware that you are than you are, he'd be you instead of you. And this no one can equal.
Just how important are we as individuals and as a species?
How important are we?
Yes.
If this world was completely annihilated this second and all beings were destroyed, it wouldn't matter one whit. It would to you. Okay. Did someone hold up their... You?
When you spoke of the Aquarian age coming, have you met, and are there people now, and particularly I was interested in those who will speak to those who have passed on and who do, and that age will come. Have you met in your age and in your time people who are in the Aquarian age and are speaking with other people?
Yes, and there's many beings that are going to come forth. The Aquarian age is going to be done more scientifically instead of through beings. In other words, an instrument which will be something like a electronic instrument, but will not be exactly an electronic instrument, and it will not have emotion. In other words, it will be able and has no preconceived ideas. And through this instrument, they will be able to communicate with people on the other side that have gone through transition.
And have you met people now who are capable of this?
No, I have met beings who are working on this type of instrument.
Have you met Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross?
No, I don't know. See, the first man that I met, didn't meet him, but I met his wife, was the inventor Edison, and he was trying this very thing. And in his last years of life, he was doing all kinds of experiments to be able to break the void between this world and the other world, and to find a machine where he could get into telepathic communication with one another. And so I met his wife, Mrs. Edison, at Chautauqua, New York, to find out if he had made any breakthrough in that field whatsoever that hadn't come out, you know, in the press or in any book. And she says, no, all of his experiments were very disappointing. And the thing that he dreaded the most was that he was going to die before he could get it accomplished, which he did.
But
now,
when you speak to the young woman up here who can go back in time, then you certainly, there must be the same action that's going on that can go into future time.
Oh, absolutely.
Or future space.
Yes.
Or other space.
Yes, I can give you the form. Yes, I can give you the formula how to do it, but I don't know how to do it.
So therefore we can create a new future.
Yes.
If we can do that.
Yes.
When you spoke of the famine coming, how do you reflect upon the famine in Ethiopia, which seems to be beyond us, that we can't?
That is part of the famine that is coming. It is said in the future the breadbasket of the United States will be taken away from the United States, and this will cause a tremendous famine. Remember, in the center of the United States is a terrible fissure, Back some time ago, there was a terrible earthquake in the Mississippi Valley. It was so bad it changed the course of the Mississippi River, and it rang the church bells in Boston, Massachusetts. There weren't many civilizations here, just Indians and things, and so we have a little record of it, except for those who were hunting in that particular area. And with this satellites which we set up in space, so they've taken pictures in infrared cameras and things, they have seen the terrible extent of this here fissure, which is in the Mississippi Valley. And since that time, they have made some measurements. The tension is building up, and it can go at any particular time. They figure when the earthquake does take place, it will be pretty close to 8.5 to 9 on the open-ended Richter scale, what an earthquake can do as far as the economy is concerned. It could, an earthquake of this sort could wreck the whole economy of the United States, because it would wreck all the different insurance companies that would have to finance it, and the hospitals that would have to take care of those that survived it and were hurt. So there's a lot of things. Have you ever read the works of Casey?
Yes.
So you can see some of the things of his prophecies into the future of the tremendous geophysical phenomena that can take place. This could help us from stopping a war.
Do you believe the story of the woman from Florida that was taken away in a spaceship for 2 hours or something one night?
I don't know. Since I don't know these things, I put it aside. I don't disbelieve it. I don't disbelieve it. I use it and catalog it as information to be verified or unverified sometime in the future.
I heard her speak, and she sounded very logical about it, but it just doesn't seem possible.
Oh, I can hypnotize somebody, make them think that they've gone to the spaceship too. That's not too difficult. So who knows? They can also give them a lie detector test, and it will verify what I have programmed them to think. So you have to be very, very careful on these things. Don't deny it, since you don't know, but don't affirm it. You should always have a little bit of doubt, because if you don't have any doubt, if you have no doubt whatsoever, you're not capable of any new information. So even doubt for a little bit, not too much, that God exists, see? There might be an opening someplace. Anybody else on this side? Mm-hmm.
Getting back to the gentleman that you said, if somebody hits him, punches him, he should not hit back and forgive them and bless them. Now, could he hit back if he could do it unemotionally? Without hating. Just to discourage the repetition of that action.
No. If you kill a man, even accidentally, he's still dead.
You'd still get the karma.
Yes, the karma would be altered because you might not have done it out of maliciousness, but the individual is still hurt or still dead. It's still karma.
Would this apply in a mercy, so-called mercy killing when someone...
Yes.
Same thing.
Mm-hmm. Mercy killing has its drawbacks. Like, for instance, say in one town they wanted me to get involved, and because you know what I teach and things on their TV about mercy killing, and I refused to go. I told the gentleman, I says that his name, I called him. I says that he was a terminal case if I ever saw one, because I knew definitely that he was going to die. His personality complex was not survivable, and that we should put his life to an end and save him a lot of misery. So he got the point. Because today, someone cannot be saved does not mean that science might not discover the very thing the very next day and save them. No, there's even people who have an incurable disease, and they freeze them quick, waiting for somebody to invent a method to cure them. Then somebody turns off the switch, and they're in trouble. Is anybody over here? Okay.
Shellyji, I have a tape that I got from the organization in California, and it's a tape of Yogananda. Mm-hmm. And on the tape he's praying, and he's saying to God, "Thou hast created us against our will. Free us, this is our plea." And I'm not sure how this fits in with the concept of the self-existent one, if he was saying to God that he has created us against our will.
Well, you can say created. It depends on, remember, Yogananda was a Hindu, and he was not always too good in the use of correct words. And as you know how I use words too, which is not always good. So when I was out there with him, he said one time, he came to me, he says he had meditated upon God. He says, and God said to him, he says, if I had to do it over again, I wouldn't have created man. And created man, man is a physical being is one thing, man is a spiritual being is another. Spiritually, you're immortal, but you are an immortal or physical body, see? And so you're encased in this body, and he wished he hadn't done that. And this is what Yogananda is meaning by God. He wished he hadn't done what he is doing to all of us who are here.
Shelly, other than degrees of balance or imbalance, what is the fundamental distinction between one entity and another?
Really, it's variations of balance.
Does that mean that we're all one in the end?
No. In order to indicate what is unity, it takes 4 dimensions to create a unity. Do you know anything about math?
No.
All right. Square root of -1 is equal to the first dimension, right? The second dimension is the square root of -1 times the square root of -1. It's the -1. The third dimension is the square root of -1 times the square root of -1 times the square root of -1. That's minus the square root of -1. The fourth dimension is the square root of -1 raised to the 4th power, which is equal to a +1. So it takes 4 dimensions to create a unit.
I'm dumb. Can you tie it together for me?
You want me to say it again?
Real slow.
See, self-conscious awareness is dimensional. As I said, there's 4 factors in self-conscious awareness. Each one is dimensionally related. When you are viewing yourself, you're viewing yourself in a dimensional manner. So in mathematics, there are 4 dimensions, and they are expressed by the square root of -1. In the beginning, no one really understood what the square root of -1 was because it interfered with your mathematical equations until they found out it was a dimensional movement, a 90-degree dimensional movement. So the square root of -1 means you have a linear existence. The square root of -1 times the square root of -1. First you have this movement, then you have this movement. It's like you move this way and then you move this way, see? And then if you have the square root of -1 times itself 3 times, you not only move this way, you move this way, and you move this way. And now if you move it 4 different ways, the 4th dimension becomes time. And so if you move it in 4 dimensions, you have now created a +1. So it takes 4 dimensions to create a unit. And the unit is spiritual. For instance, if you have 16 dimensions, you only have 4 units. If you have 17 dimensions, you have 4 units functioning through the first dimension.
What is the distinctive quality, if there is one, that differentiates
between
this
any
entity from this entity?
All right. There is an infinite number of factors, let's say. And if you raise this infinite number of factors to the infinite power, it's the arrangement. In other words, there's no 2 beings who have identically the same arrangement, the same coding. And since the variation is infinite, you can never have 2 numbers. Like, for instance, they say the fingerprint of any 2 is different. The snowflakes which fall down, no 2 are exactly the same. It's the arrangement that makes the difference. This is the best, but this is also considered states of unbalance. Yes, sir?
Shellyji, how does the number 12 relate to the name of God?
In this way, when you are aware that you are, there are 12 different factors. In other words, we say you're the beholder, you're the beheld. That's 2 factors which are the same symbol. So in ancient Egypt and Hebrew, they gave it the sound of H. The V, which they gave in the name of God, went the act between the beholder and the beheld, like in your meditation on this and this. And then the I, which was a yod, it's the all of the variations, which is your memory banks. Now, when you had 4 factors, 2 of which are identically the same, and you rearrange them in all different ways, like for instance IHVH, which they call Yavaha, that is one way. Or you can arrange it HVIH, that's another way, or HIVH, or HHVI, and you keep arranging it. You can only arrange it in 12 different ways. And this is then referred to as the 12 different aspects of the Godhead, the 12 different ways in which you catalog information, the 12 ways. In other words, it's this, you have the 12 disciples of Jesus, the 12 labors of Hercules, the 12 nights of the round table, the 12 months in the year, though there's 13 lunar months, the 12 tribes of the Israelites that inherited the earth. Always a basic 12, because this is a law of self-conscious awareness. This is a law of God. And in this way, you have the various meaning of the various aspects of the Godhead, since each one of the factors, each one of the variations has a separate meaning. And each tribe was to indicate this particular meaning. Like in the Hercules, we had the Leo, the lion, he conquered the lion. So he conquered Leo, the factor within himself. And in one factor he struggles with a serpent or with a bull. In other words, he's conquering each one of these particular factors within himself. And so in this way he gains balanced self-conscious awareness because he's conquering all the unbalanced factors within himself. And there's 12 basic unbalanced factors. If we take and find out of these 12, how come the 7? We take the first 12, which is the first one, and we compare it with all the others. You can compare it to itself. This is called a sun aspect, and this is what is meant by the sun. We can compare it to 30 degrees on either side. This is called the Mercury aspect, the communication aspect. We can compare it to 60 degrees on either side. This is then referred to as the Venusian aspect. We can compare it to 90 degrees on either side. This is called the Martian aspect. We can compare it to 120 degrees on either side, and this is referred to as a Jupiterian aspect. We can compare it to 150 degrees on either side. This is a Saturnian aspect, which I had talked to the other one, which is oftentimes called the, what was that word? Guilt trip. And we compare it to 180 degrees away, and this is called the lunar aspect. So we see we have 2, which are the conjunction, and the opposition, which are singular, and we have 5, which are dual, because there's 30 degrees on either side. And out of this we get 7. And each one refers to a different position or a different chakra on the body. Like this is the sun, and this is the moon. And then we go down, like in your cervicals, this is Mercury. And if we go down further into the dorsals, this is Venus. We go down to the lumbar, this is Mars. We go into the sacral, this is Jupiter, and the coccygeal, which is Saturn. And after all, if the moon is God, how far away from God can you get then to Saturn, which is the farthest out, you see. And so they say that Saturn and Satan is the same way because you're far from God. And it all comes because of the 12 system. You get the 7 system and the 7 chakras. And so this is how God was expressed. This is God loves 7 above all numbers, because this is a number of victory. Success, because this is a number of sasamana, this is a number of the chakras. But it is gained through the Ida and Pingali of the 12 systems, 6 against 6. And when they're balanced, when the intensity and duration of Ida, or the first 6, is equal to the intensity and duration of Pingali, which is the next 6, are equal, they collapse into sasamana, and then you have the 7th system. Remember, in our computers we use a binary system, 1 and 0. And so 1 is 1, 1 and 0 is 2, 1 and 1 is 3, and then we have 100, which is 4. Those we just convert. There's many different systems, and the system to express nature is 10, the system to express man is 12, because this is a law of self-conscious awareness. And the self-conscious awareness is the meaning of what God is. This is a law of God. And no one can escape the law of God. He might think he can, but he can't. This is why it is said that whatsoever you do unto another, you do more so unto yourself, but at a different time and different place. And you see, all of us, we know definitely that that man down the street, he deserves this, what he has done. He deserves this just deserves. But me, oh God, I am different. Hear my plea, hear my prayer, let me escape my karma. This is wrong. If this is true, then justice does not exist. Justice must be true for all beings, and all beings must have their just deserts. But this is why I say, get off the wheel and get on the stick. And I got to this idea because, you know, in the TV.
Shelly, what does humor have to do with the spiritual path? Does God laugh?
Oh, he laughs an awful lot. Look at us down here, and you think that isn't a joke.
In all the scriptures of different religions, although it's very inspiring, there's no humor in it, at least that I pick up. And it makes me wonder where humor lies.
Every saint that I have seen seems to have an awful lot of humor. How else could he tolerate all that he has seen? The pathos of looking at man. God had to have an enormous amount of humor to let us exist.
Good.
And I think God, as far as I know God, he has a lot of humor. He's put up with me, and that's something.
Shellyji, you talked about on the astral plane there's a learning level. You said something about the 5th level. Is there a level of beings on the astral or higher planes that are actively involved in the physical level of Earth?
Yes, they're usually on the lower planes. Higher planes, they don't even want to talk about Earth. They forgot about Earth. They don't even look like human beings. They look like balls of light. Which did you have?
Yes. So Kriyananda has said that through Pluto and Pluto alone, man can become free. How does one learn to master Pluto? And can you differentiate between the Plutonian or Scorpion symbols of the phoenix, the eagle, and the dove?
He can do better than that in explaining the last part, the phoenix, the eagle, and the dove. But Pluto, he is right, Pluto has two basic factors. Remember, all planets are some dual in their nature. Pluto has the same position in your cerebral spinal system of Kriya as Mars. And Pluto, when it is in adverse condition, it snarls and tangles up things in your life. And Pluto, when it's in favorable condition, untangles and unifies things in your life. It's like, for instance, you're going to add a bunch of fractions. You have to find the lowest common denominator, otherwise you can't add the fractions together. Pluto is like the lowest common denominator. And so it clarifies things, it unifies things, and it brings things to, you might say, oneness. Above Pluto, we go to the next planet, which conquers our fears of death and brings us into the real Aquarian age. Now, you're bringing into the dove, the phoenix,
And the eagle.
Eagle. He has said it. Kriyananda, you explain these things to her. He will understand that much better than what I can. But there's many books on symbolism which can help you to understand it. And exactly what he was trying to remember. Every symbol has many facets to it. And this is why a symbol is rather important in explaining things, because of its number of facets which it uses. And like in dreams, you have many symbols which you use, and a good interpreter can observe the rather number of facets associated with a dream and get many bits of information that the average individual cannot accomplish. They said of all the arts of prediction, he who is a dream interpreter is perhaps the highest evolved and indicates great spirituality. And so with your symbols, I can give you some symbols. For instance, the phoenix is a bird which is reborn out of its own ashes. And the dove, of course, is peace. And what was the other symbol? The eagle, and of course the eagle is the highest aspect of Scorpio, which means is completely rejuvenated. And so in the world, about every 400 years, you had to have a new avatar, a new teacher who had to come to help explain things, because the English language, or the language which was in existence, had changed so much that you no longer knew what they meant by what they said. Look, we have 9 men on the Supreme Court bench, and they're having a lot of trouble to know what our founding fathers meant by what they said. And if we have that in this short space of time, think of what happens in 400 years. And so this is the idea of the phoenix, so that it is reborn, so that the truth is reborn. And the eagle is, of course, the highest advance of the Scorpion region, which is regeneration in itself. And the dove is the peace of love. Love is really the phoenix, and the whole idea, which is always born forth, is to express unselfish love. That's the whole thing that the cosmic dreamer is trying to get across to everybody. Remember, Jesus didn't do anything to get off the cross, but he forgave everybody while he was on the cross of their sins. And he, as they said, through his suffering did he cleanse all others, so that if they believed upon him, they were sort of saved. It was an idea, a symbol that has very great religious significance. It's also, through the grace of God, you're allowed spiritually to come in here, occupy a physical vehicle to learn the technique of the cosmic dreamer. You don't have to stay here if you don't want to. You can get out. But he's always teaching the same thing, unselfish love. The act of giving freely, without recompense, without selfish thought. If you give unselfish love with the idea that you're going to get unselfish love back, see, now you're doing it for a price. That's no good. You must do it. The act of doing it itself is the payment. And this causes God consciousness. It's just another symbolic way of saying the same thing. I love symbols because I would really prefer to speak in symbols, because then I can be highly accurate. Remember, they went to an oracle, 2 armies, and they come to this great oracle, and it says, behold, each one says there's a battle going to take place. Will I be a victor? Will we be victorious? And the oracle says, I see a great victory. But she forgot to say who. So it's always wise to speak symbolically. Then you can always be right, you see.
Maybe you'd like to take one last question, final question.
One last question?
Yeah, one last question.
You pick out the one that you want to ask.
Go ahead.
Okay.
You said you don't have to stay in this plane, you can get out. Where would you go if you got out?
You can go outside the cosmic dream of God.
And what would be there? What would be the existence? What would be the life? The lifestyle, as it were. What would be the...
You wouldn't look like you look now, I can guarantee you. You'd be a state of awareness you can't measure it in what you are familiar in here. This is a result of God's cosmic dream. And so this is under His laws, under His condition.
The other would not be necessarily a good thing.
Not necessarily bad, not necessarily good. It's what they do, they press buttons out there. Somebody would have a glorious time with you. Remember, we are all in a very high state of unbalanced self-conscious awareness. And anyone who's in this particular state, I have proof of that because you're here. We're all in this highly state of unbalanced self-conscious awareness. And if I take the stimulant away from you, you fall apart. You fly apart. And there's plenty of beings who love to take advantage of that, who have a higher degree of self-balanced conscious awareness. They can enslave you. In fact, look how enslaved you are right now. You're controlled by that physical vehicle. And the vehicle that you're in enslaves you. Have a different vehicle, different enslavement. You look, you're eye-oriented, ear-oriented, smell-oriented. Dog, which spells backward as God, is just the reverse. Maybe you should go home and bow down to your dog. Was there one? Was that supposed to be the last one, Claudette?
Yeah, it's getting late.
It's getting okay. Okay. Oh, you want to take off my?
Yeah, sure. Do you want to find the roots?
Peace. What else is there? You got it?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, great. Yeah, you still got it in the pocket here. Don't want to run off with that.
Thank you, Shelly. If people would like to sit and meditate quietly and then leave when they're ready. Thank you for joining us.